Recently, Matt Powell tried to convert atheists to Christianity with a video. So I watched it, and I'm still an atheist. And there was no proof of God in it. I was a bit confused, but he then released a video with 10 proofs of God. Maybe it's adjoining one. So we've watched one, now we're watching the next. I mean, it has to be a two-party who was trying to convert atheists and never provided proof of the thing that they don't believe in. I'm looking forward to this, proof from the one and only Matt Powell. It's got to be good.
And we're going to just run through these real fast for sake of time.
Okay, and I'm just going to drink my Yazoo for sake of sanity. My job literally entails drinking Yazoo now. It's going to be my thing from now on. Yazoo.
Number 1, the order and design of the cosmos points to an intelligent mind. You do not get matter and energy from nothing. If I said that a rock just appeared in this room from nowhere, would anybody believe me? But imagine if the entire universe just poofed into existence from nothing with no God. That is magic. If you're an atheist, you're believing in mysticism and magic. You cannot get something from nothing. And order and design means that there is a designer.
Okay, so for Matt's point 1, we seem to have a lot of points made. And I'm just going to say, let's accept it for now, just for the first bit. He says that order and design requires intelligence, therefore an intelligent designer, essentially. So, if that's the case, why isn't he believing in simulation theory? That requires an intelligent designer, and seems a hell of a lot more logical than, a being with no spatial dimensions, has no temporal dimensions, spoke the universe into existence, and then it poofed there. That's mysticism. Isn't it, Matt? Like you say. It's magic. Now, if I was to accept Matt's straw man of an atheist here, where, the universe poofed into existence and I must believe in that and I believe it's magic, then we've got supernatural being of no spatial dimensions and no time is, magic entity number 1. And then we've got spoke the universe into existence, which would be like an incantation. That's magic part number 2, spells. And then those two things are what Matt believes in, 2 magic elements. And then we've got the third magical element of poofed universe into existence. Now, if I believed that, then I would believe in 1 magical element, but Matt believes in 3. Is it because I don't believe in enough magic that you don't like atheists? I do hope we get some better proofs of God in this video. I mean, in the last video, Matt tried to convert me into theism, into his Christianity, but it didn't have any proof in it, or evidence, or any arguments at all. It was just, he didn't like atheists, and he didn't understand cosmology, amongst other things. So he pointed out that matter and energy comes from nothing in the atheist viewpoint, but again, he's just attacking the atheist argument. It still doesn't mean his one's true. And in the previous video, I explained that nothingness might be an impossible concept, because if you have nothing, then there's still something there. We have, space-time, we've got gravity. In my hand right now, we've got a sense of gravity, gravitational waves. Light is coming in from over there. It's pretty difficult to have nothing at all. And even if we tried to create the best vacuum ever and suck everything out of this little tiny cube, there's still stuff there. There's virtual particles that pop in and out of existence, and as a potential cause for the Big Bang, we've got quantum fluctuations, but we don't know that's true. But we are okay with saying that we don't know until we know. And I think that's one of the biggest differences. I don't claim to have the answer here for that part. Now, for the rock part. If a rock appeared on a table, and you say, where did it come from? And I said, nowhere. And everyone would disbelieve me, quite rightly so, because we don't experience that on a regular basis, do we? We don't just suddenly see rocks appearing on tables for no reason, just in front of us. But, rocks come from places. Maybe through a window you hear a smash, and then it appears on the table in front of you. But obviously without that smash, and a rock appears on the table, and I said it was a wizard, you wouldn't believe me either. And also, if we go into further ones of these arguments, I would not just be claiming that it's a wizard, I'd be going outside seeing, 2,000 people dressed as wizards and going it was that one. Notice how there's way more assumptions made in Matt's arguments.
Number 2, because everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist at one point, at some point in the past, whether it was through the Big Bang or through God speaking it into existence. The universe began to exist. Do things just begin to exist on their own? No, you would have to have something outside of matter and energy bringing into existence matter and energy.
So, this is basically the cosmological argument, but with an addition, because people argued the cosmological argument, and it, stopped working. So they've added this now, that it begins to exist rather than simply exists. It's now the Kalam's cosmological argument. And Matt Powell delivers this line as if it's true, because confidence is truth in his mind. But the premise itself might not even be true at all. In quantum physics, virtual particles pop in and out of existence with no apparent cause. Now, we do not know the answer to the cause of the Big Bang, like I said, but the leading idea is that it was a quantum fluctuation. But yet Matt said it was from nothing. Now, if a quantum fluctuation can happen, that also entails that there was something. And one of the biggest misconceptions that almost everyone seems to think is that the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. It wasn't that we know of for sure. It could have been. But the Big Bang only describes inflation. So, the universe existing, then inflating, that's the Big Bang. Not the existing, when it inflates. That's what the Big Bang is explaining. It has nothing to do with the cause itself. The cause of the Big Bang may have a cause, which we describe as potentially a quantum fluctuation, but again, we do not know. The best way to think about it, though, is that the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe as we know it, not the beginning of its existence. It's very possible that the Big Bang wasn't the beginning, but just the beginning that we can go back to. The universe could have existed just as long as they think God did. And there's no reason to think otherwise. In fact, I argue with people in my comment section, at least respectfully from these people, that the universe itself is God. And I can't deny their God exists. It does. The universe does exist. I just don't think it's a God. But I find that the cosmological argument, the Kalam's one as well, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The reason theists changed it is because it used to be that everything that exists has a cause, which instantly flipped it back around onto them, where if the universe existed, it needed a cause, and that was God. And then God must exist in that situation, so therefore, based on the cosmological argument, God needed a cause. So, can the Kalam's cosmological argument stop that? Well, they think that God didn't have a beginning, that God was eternal. But it still is problematic. And here's why. So, our universe contains us. And if we want to think about this a bit differently, because they believe that God is beyond space and time, I think that argues God out of existence. He has no spatial dimensions, and he has no time dimensions. I mean, pause this video, you get rid of my time, and then you could close it down to get rid of me, and that gets rid of my spatial dimensions. Don't do that, because you'll disappear, and then you'd have to come back. But anyway, you get the point. Like, I would then disappear from your screen. I would not exist. So I kind of feel like it's arguing God out of existence, but I'm trying to understand. And the best way I can do that is thinking of the program Blender, or you can think of a game like, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto, or any game that you have a three-dimensional world in. No matter where you move your character in your three-dimensional world, or on GTA, or whatever games you play, I'm getting too old now to play these games, but wherever you move your character in his three-dimensional space and time, you'll never reach you in real life. That's like us with God. But so God exists outside of time and space like we do with those video game characters. That's probably the best way I can describe it. And if you've got a better example, let me know. If that's the case, then God is also said, in Matt's view, to have started our universe, which means time had a 0 point. If time had a 0 point, God couldn't have flicked the switch to turn on time. Because if he did, that means time was already present. Because if it wasn't, there could be no change, because time, or change, requires time. So there must have existed some form of time. Now, just like in Blender in these games, time can be sped up, slowed down, stopped, started. So this also would work with God, because it works for us in those games. But why does it work for us? It works because time exists for us, and it's separate to that of the game characters like GTA or in Blender, where you've got the timeline at the bottom, on YouTube where you've got a timeline going across here. So God has his own dimension. It's a time dimension. If he doesn't, then he doesn't exist, because he just wouldn't have been able to start time, or if he does exist and didn't create us, then he's not a God. At least in my mind. people can have many different definitions of God and, do with that as you wish. So, if that's the case, God must have his own dimension at time. And if that's the case, he doesn't need space, but he needs one dimension at least to do the things he said he'd done. But that means God exists in a form of existence, a universe of his own. So God requires a universe to start us. He at least needs some parameters, something that exists beyond God. And if that's the case, who created God's universe? Because that must have begun to exist. Or God's universe is actually the God, and God is just a character. I'm not sure how you want to take that, but ultimately God requires a universe. And if a universe requires a God, then God must have a God still.
Number 3, the Anthropic Principle. Life is balanced on a razor's edge, folks. If we were a little bit closer to the sun, we would burn up. If we were a little bit farther from the sun, we would freeze to death. If the moon wasn't in just a specific position, we would be drowned by the waves that the moon actually causes, the tides.
Well, I guess it doesn't sound too intelligently designed then, does it? Life is balanced on a razor's edge. Finally sitting one bit too far and we're all dead. The other way we're too far and we die. It's like it wasn't designed by an intelligent designer. It kind of defeats yourself in the previous point. The universe was intelligently designed, so much so that 99.999% of it is dangerous to us, to the point we'll die instantly. So he says if we were a little bit closer to the sun, we'd burn up, and if we were a little bit too far away, we'd freeze. Which isn't true, because if it were, then that's what happens already. The Earth's orbit around the sun is elliptical, not so extreme like I'm doing, but you get my point. Which means we do get closer to the sun. Ironically, if you're in the northern hemisphere, it gets closer to the sun in winter, and it gets further away from the sun in summer. And the reason we still have heat in summer, more so, is because of the angle of the Earth, not the distance. So he also mentioned that the moon is at a perfect spot for the tides so that we don't drown, but, the moon used to be a lot closer than it is now, when it was so close that it wasn't just the water it affected, it was literally the land that would rise up slightly. But he said it was based on our survival, so that we don't drown. But if the moon was twice as far, it's not going to kill us all instantly. I mean, if it was like twice as close, there would be more seismic activity, I suppose, and more tidal forces, but at the same time, the moon was that close at one point. It would be just like pouring water into a bowl, and then the water molecules in the bowl go, oh my god, look at all these high walls for our security. And then you pour more water in the bowl and it goes, oh my god, we fit perfectly in this bowl. And then you pour more water in and it all flows out everywhere, and the ones that are left are there saying, oh my god, we fit perfectly. We evolved to live on this planet. Our evolutions had adapted to the environment. The environment wasn't adapted to us. It's about as simple as that.
Number 4, the amount of information in a single cell is so densely packed that it demands an intelligent mind. You cannot get information from nothingness. That is foolishness.
Again, with the information from nothingness is foolishness. You have a God that made us from what? Himself? Because nothing existed around him, right? And he didn't use his own physical form because he doesn't have one. He has no spatial dimensions. And even if he did, he doesn't have like some sort of perfect body that he just pulled a finger off and just threw it into the void with his magical incantation to create the universe from his finger. No, he created it from what, Matt? Nothing. But anyway, as for the information in a single cell, these are not necessarily just like bits of information. They work as information, but ultimately what I believe he's talking about is stuff like DNA. And in this case, the information is actually just proteins. It is a physical thing. It's not like on my computer where you've got like a hard drive which has information in it, which still has physical properties. But, I don't understand computers as much as this. So to me, a computer is like magic to me, which it kind of explains Matt on this, where he thinks atheists just believe in magic stuff when it's actually science. When you learn about it, it stops becoming magic. But that would be just like me looking at the Earth, going, Look at all these rocks. We're going to name them Rock 1, Rock 2, Rock 3, Rock 4, Rock 5. And then we go to the water, and then we go, salt water and not salt water. And then we got, brisk water. You just create levels and just name all the different possible levels. And then you get, different formations of rock, like minerals and metals and other things. And you've also got the periodic table of elements. You just go all those, put it all in there. You've got loads of information now because we've named it 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s with alphanumeric data set. That doesn't mean it all of a sudden requires intelligence just because I've labelled everything on the earth. The intelligence was the labelling. We labelled it. Just like we did with the SAL and the information stored in it. We've just labelled it. That's it. We didn't open up a SAL and then look in it on a microscope and then have, a painting by Mozart signed and everything. No, we just saw stuff and named it. That's it. Nothing more than that. Remember, Matt was the one that said it was foolish.
Number 5, life comes from life. To me, it's much more plausible to believe and assert that life came into existence from a creator rather than life coming into existence from a rock.
Right, the reference to the rock thing there is that minerals come from rocks and life required the gathering of certain things, potentially, before it started and developed and moved on. Ultimately, life, you can think of it as simply by going backwards. Okay, we've got complex organisms. Eventually, we know for sure that they were like single-celled organisms, and we know that there was even simpler versions of those things in the past. I'm no expert. But before life, you have biological chemical reactions. And then before that, you get chemical reactions, which is non-life. The transition between those two things, biological chemical reactions and chemical reactions, is not that big of a gap all of a sudden. We don't know how it happened. I'm not saying that we do, but I'm just saying the gap is not actually that big of a jump. We just don't know the highest of details on this aspect yet. But I wanted to explain that because it just simplifies the whole thing. So thanks, Matt, for bringing up the rock. We definitely didn't come from it. We weren't birthed from rocks. Rocks didn't grow us on them like fungus or moss. Okay. But, it does lead into a good way. And you're never going to stop using the rock shit because you saw it in one book or one article somewhere and you've gone with it and ran off with it. And misquoted it as well because it was just that water rained on rocks, rocks eroded, minerals came from rocks. And his main point was life comes from life. The birds and the bees. You came from a person, or two people, probably, and they came from two people individually, so that would be like 4 people, and so on and so forth. Life comes from life. But eventually we know that it doesn't, whether you're an atheist or a theist, because in Matt's view, you have God was the creator. Now, is God alive? Is God life? If he is, then you must go back to your cosmological argument. And where does life come from? Life comes from life. So God must have came from life, because he's life. You're probably going to try and reword it now to try and exclude that argument, rather than actually address the issue that's at hand. But, it's your choice, Matt. But I feel like I've already addressed it enough by saying chemical reactions, biological chemical reactions, life. We don't know how it happened exactly, but you can't just put God in there and, just because we don't know doesn't mean that you know.
Humans have an innate drive for meaning in life. I believe every single person in this room is seeking meaning in life. Let me tell you something. If we are seeking meaning in life, that means we were designed by a God who created us with a purpose. And if atheism is true, and there is no God, there's no meaning in life. And a lot of atheists tell me, I make up my own meaning. That's make-believe. They're living in a make-believe world. You don't make up your own meaning. You are assigned meaning by the ultimate purpose giver, God himself.
Does everyone have meaning in life? Like a predestined meaning? I'm not so sure. Really depends on how you view free will and stuff like that, and this sort of thing. I'm not sure. It doesn't mean it is true. He believes everyone in that room has a meaning in life, and that's fine. He can believe that. It doesn't make it true. I don't see how that proves God. Like, even if it was true, let's say everyone does have meaning in life. Why does that mean that? Well, if the meaning was to reproduce and survive, if that was the meaning of our life and existence, then that's the result, isn't it? It's just to reproduce and survive. Then that's the meaning. That's our purpose. But I don't know if that's true either. But where it comes from would be evolution. It was beneficial for us to feel that way. And I'm still going off of the assumption that he's correct, that everyone feels that way, because I don't know for sure. But ultimately, if we have that sense and that drive, it comes from evolution. And again, I don't care which version of evolution you subscribe to, whether it be my version or Matt's version, because either way, we both believe in evolution, even if he wants to deny it, because he then goes on to say, no, evolution doesn't exist, but from Noah's Ark we evolved. He just uses different words, and that's fine. We can accept either one of our arguments for this. It was beneficial for our survival, therefore over time it just becomes innate for everyone to do that. Those behaviours were then selected through natural selection pressures, and it increased our chances of survival for some reason. I just don't see why Matt even feels a need to put God in there, unless he just... I suppose he's presupposing God, and therefore it's just easier to align dots when you're putting the answer there first. He's already locked in, so to speak. And I want to address the atheism issue. So people who don't believe in a God make their own meaning in life, but that's make-believe, apparently. Not believing in the make-believe supernatural entity, because, it's a supernatural entity, which means it doesn't exist, because if it existed, it would be natural. Like a vampire. If we suddenly found a vampire, then vampires are not supernatural anymore. They exist, we can now study them, we can look at them, we can, do tests, and we can find them. They become a part of nature. So if they didn't exist, then they'd be supernatural. But anyway, so the make-believe part is the supernatural stuff, but having meaning in life, and I don't know, let's say God does give you this meaning in life, but an atheist has never been given that meaning in life. Maybe they have it, God sent it to them, and the message just got lost along the way, but there's a person down here on Earth that hasn't got any meaning in life that's been given to them divinely. What else are they going to do? If they want meaning in life and they've had no message from God, they're going to make up their own, because it's their life. They figure out what they want in their life instead. Sure, they are making it up, but that's it, really, isn't it? They're just making it up. They're not making it up and pretending they have a reason to make it up for, God sent me this message to do this.
Number 7, moral absolutes demand that there is a moral lawgiver. If there is no God, how do you tell right from wrong? It's all subjective. It's all based on feelings. A lot of people will tell me it depends on what our society decides. Well, in Adolf Hitler's society, it was right to kill Jews, but is it right to do that? No, not at all. There is no morality to that. That is evil. If there is no God, there's no such thing as evil. And think about this too, and I know we got to wrap up, but if there is no God and evil things happen, how would everything ever be made right? The problem of evil is not for Christianity, it's for atheists. Christianity offers a solution that every single wrong that has ever happened in this world will be made right someday.
And yet the all-good God doesn't make it right now. Why worship something evil? I mean, God is all good, but yet created evil. So therefore he can't be all good, can he? But I'm not sure how the problem of evil is a problem for atheists. Evil exists. That's it. It's an observation. We perceive things as wrong because it harms us, whether physically, mentally, emotionally. I don't know. Just it stops us. It impedes our progress. Those sorts of things could be considered evil. And ironically, religion covers most of those. So the answer to this statement that moral absolutes demand a moral lawgiver is that let's look at reality and see that there are no moral absolutes, at least not that I can tell. Unless you just get really picky with the details and, cover every single flipping variable that there is possible, but even then you get probabilistic eventually, then you don't have a moral absolute evil. Not if you're basing it on just the simple action. So, for example, stabbing someone. Is that evil? If you say yes, then is surgeons evil? Then you're going to say no, you're going to make an exception because it's not an absolute evil. And even if there were moral absolutes, then that would make me question about your God. So you've got God, but you've also got moral absolutes. These would be separate concepts anyway, because unless God himself is the moral lawgiver, so that's what you're saying, right? So God himself is the moral lawgiver, which means anything God does is good. So why are you, criticizing Hitler, to be fair? Because Hitler killed quite a few million people, and I think he even topped God, to be fair. But God killed, what, 2 million people during the Great Flood? It's estimated. So I don't know why he's criticizing Hitler if his moral lawgiver says it's okay for, mass killings. Also, in 2 Samuel 12, God killed a baby directly. God himself punished the baby's father by killing the baby. Not the father, an innocent baby. So is that morally good now because your God done that? I mean, he is the moral lawgiver after all, right? I don't understand how you can say stuff like this and think that you'll have some sort of good thing. And if, by the way, this is a moral absolutes, and your God is doing stuff that I view morally wrong, your God has told me, by your logic, Matt, that your God's evil. I don't understand how you can think this at all. This makes no sense. Moral arguments end up being so stupendously overcomplicated for no reason when it just doesn't make sense to say that it was a God. In reality, it again stems from evolution, even Matt's version of evolution, where we developed in social groups, whether it be in cities, towns. Even if we had technology as soon as the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, according to Matt, we still lived in societies for years, before moral stuff was even wrote down, really, according to Matt, because I assume that he imagines text that was written 10,000 years ago didn't exist. We're a social species. We have learned to be moral. My kids have learned to be moral over the course of, the first few years of their life. Tests and studies have been done on babies to prove, not babies, but like toddlers, to prove that they have an understanding of right and wrong, potentially. I question some of the methods they use, but it seems that there's some evidence to suggest that they do. This doesn't mean a God gave it to them. It seems more evolutionary based. It just doesn't seem to make sense to say they were magically imbued with these things and then call everyone else who doesn't believe that magic or thinking. But yeah, when we say something that seems to make sense, it was passed on, through behavioural traits from parents, as well as being taught it through their environment, being around their parents who have the same mindset in thinking and probably had to learn the same things they did as they were growing up. No, that's bad. No, yes, that's good. Here's a reward. These are learnt behaviours too. So it's a combination of many things. But one of those things doesn't require God.
Number 8, we experience love. And let me say this, there is more to love than a biochemical reaction. And if you're married this morning, or if you have children this morning, or if you have a mom or a dad this morning, you probably know this, that there's more to love than just chemicals. According to Darwinists, we're nothing but chemicals. But according to the Bible, we were designed with a purpose, and we were designed with the ability to love. If we were just biological machines that are coded with just nothing but genetic material, how is it that we have the ability to love one another to the point of laying down our lives for each other? How is that possible if we're nothing but robots? Do robots give their lives for each other?
This is simple. We're not robots. I'm pretty sure Charles Darwin never said that we were actually robots. Right, so basically his premise isn't even about love. I mean, the Bible spoke about love, which gave him the leeway into talking about the Bible, but he used love to get there. The point he's making is, why do we have experiences? Because love could easily be replaced with anger, and jealousy, and envy, and greed, and gluttony. 7 deadly sins could also be put there, which ultimately was also created by God in Matt's mind. But ultimately it's an argument for conscious experience, the ability to experience things as a conscious being. That's, I believe, what he's getting at here, ultimately. And I do kind of want to point out, why does Matt have to strawman everything? Well, I have to try and figure out the best way he's tried to put his words. And yeah, I see this from lots of atheist content, but not a lot from theists. Theists tend to strawman a lot. Not all, but, some, the majority do that I see. So basically, consciousness seems to be an emergent property coming from the brain. And part of the reason I know this is because of how anesthetic works. So, an anesthesiologist, I'm using big words now, to put you asleep with general anesthetic. Not, put to sleep, let's put him down, but put to sleep, so that they can't experience anything. They're switching off consciousness, like a light switch. And just in case you're wondering, but also just in case you don't want to know, because there are some people who may be going, for surgery, this might not be a good thing to hear. So when you get put to sleep with general anesthetic, you're not just going to sleep. You are not in a sleep state when you're under that anesthetic. How anesthesia works isn't fully understood yet, so I've looked it up just in case modern stuff's come out, because I don't want to give out old information and I don't want to give out wrong information, especially on stuff that I'm not 100% familiar with. But Anesthesia doesn't work by putting you to sleep. It, puts you in an unconscious state, which you can then be, reversed, rather than, killing you. Because, that would kind of work too. You just wouldn't wake up, which obviously isn't the goal. But anyway, so the mechanism by which consciousness turns off is still not fully understood, but research suggests that general anesthetic disrupts brain communication in several ways. Alright, so number 1 is suppression of the thalamocortical activity. So the thalamus acts as a relay station for sensory information which reaches the cortex, the part of the brain responsible for awareness and cognition. General anesthetics reduce activity in the thalamus, effectively cutting off sensory input from reaching conscious awareness. I'm not going to read them all, but essentially, disruption of cortical connectivity, neural network breakdown, effects on neurotransmitters, and loss of feedback loops. Essentially, it stops the brain from communicating with many parts of itself. If that stops, the emergent property of consciousness also stops. You're still alive, but you're not conscious anymore because the brain has been reduced in functionality. So it's not some magical property, unless you want to say anesthetic is also some sort of magical property, or some physical thing that affects the supernatural. In which case I don't understand why we're not using anesthetic on ghost hunting trips. So, all of these emotions could be reduced to simple things. Just like you could reduce consciousness to more simpler little things, but at the same time, despite them being complex anyway, but as you get multiple complex things, you get something more complex. So it can be reduced to something simpler, but that doesn't mean each one's simple. That's fine. It doesn't have to be. So if consciousness is a collection of loads of different things working together, it becomes an emergent property. Now, if you take away some of these things, consciousness slowly starts to fade away. No longer does it have the property of consciousness. But when those things start working again, it becomes conscious again. So you can reduce it down to simple things, but you won't find consciousness because it only appears when it's emergent. It's kind of like trying to find an ocean when you're only looking at puddles. And the same can be said with love, even if it is just some sort of biochemical reaction in the brain, and we reduce it to something as simple as that. The emergent property of that reacting in your brain along with other things creates a full experience that you as an individual feel as love. The same goes for anger and jealousy and all the other things there. Love is a very strong emotion.
Number 9, free will. Darwinists believe that there is no such thing as free will. You can go to your university, you can ask them, and they will say there's no free will. We are programmed by genetic processes through natural selection, and we cannot make choices ultimately. We are just robots. That is not true. Everybody in here knows that we were designed with a free will, that you have the ability to make choices. And if you have that ability to choose between right and wrong, that means that there is a right and wrong moral lawgiver. And not only that, that also means that you were designed by somebody that gave you the ability to make those choices.
Free will is not a problem for atheists. It doesn't matter if we have free will or not. It doesn't matter which you choose. A god or no god could still exist. But for a theist who believes in a tri-omni god, that becomes a problem. But we'll talk about that in a second. Personally, I don't know if free will exists. It could just simply be an illusion. For example, I do know that it takes time for light to reach our eyes. It takes time for our eyes to process that information. It takes time for that information to travel to our brain and for our brain to process that information. Now, based on that logic, any information by sensory input that we get, we receive it late. Which means we don't live in the present, we only live in the past. And we can only send messages to, let's say, my arm. I put my hand on a fire, I'm going to say. I put my hand on a fire. Now, I don't notice it straight away, not in that instance that I do it, no matter how good my senses are. If it travels all at light speed, it's still not going to reach my brain the instance that it happens. What's going to happen is it's going to travel with information through my arm to my spine, and then there'll be two things that happen here, I think. I'm not 100% sure on the details here, but one gets sent back to get an instant reflex reaction, and another gets sent to my brain. And then loads of more impulses are going, but ultimately the information gets to my brain late. And even the instant reflex, as best it can be, is still not instant, as I was trying to say. Because it takes time for all of this to happen, but ultimately we live in the past. There's no denying that. Even if it is only nanoseconds or however short it may be, but we do live in the past based on that, and we can only interact with the future by sending messages to the future. So if I did try and catch a ball, I have to predict where it's going to be, and that's a complicated task for a robot, I'm just pointing out, because that message will always reach my hand late. Like if I'm saying, okay, it's got to catch here, and I'll catch it just in the nick of time. If I do it like that, I have to go slightly in the future because it's going to take time for my brain to send that message to my arm. For the same reason, it takes time for the arm to get the message to my brain. So if we live in the past, our conscious experience must also then be in the past. So that means all the decisions we have actually made might actually be nanoseconds in the past, which means they've already happened without our ability to change that. And that's not even the reason why scientists think that we don't have free will. There's a few other reasons why we might not have free will, and that would be determinism. Everything on a macro level is determinate as far as we can tell, which means all of our experiences in our past may lead our brains to think in ways that will always lead to the same outcomes. Maybe it's not probabilistic. If you could pinpoint every single variable, there is a possibility that free will doesn't exist. However, reality isn't completely determinate because there's the quantum realm, quantum physics. In quantum physics, that's not run by determinism, it's run by probabilities, in which case free will becomes a possibility again. If our brains do function on a quantum level, then free will is definitely a possibility. The difference is, we just don't know for sure, whereas Matt thinks he does know, and ironically, it's a problem. So, Matt believes in free will. He also believes in an omniscient God, a God that knows everything, even my future. So if I had my fingers on my hand, and I said I was going to raise one of my fingers, probably not my middle one, if I was going to raise one of my fingers, God would know exactly which one of my fingers it was going to be. There's no problem here, because God knows which one I'm going to do, right? Well, if God does know which one I'm going to put up, I don't have free will. Because I can't disobey God's law, God's plan, that's it, God's grand plan. I wouldn't be able to betray that, would I? Because if I could, then God's not omniscient. If God is omniscient, then I don't have free will. You can't have both here. Now, many people argue this always with the multiverse theory, but then I don't understand why, because you're still saying your God isn't omniscient if he doesn't know which finger I'm going to put up. Just because there's a different version of me in a different parallel universe in another reality, it does not matter. I am this version's me. Which finger am I going to put up? God. And then God says, which finger? And then I do something else. And then God says, I knew you were going to do that. Either I don't have free will, or God is not omniscient. Luckily, I don't believe in God, otherwise this would be a problem for my worldview, wouldn't it, if I also believed in free will, which I'm not sure on, to be honest. But that's not a problem. It's a problem for you for some reason. You just don't like it? It might be an illusion, but it doesn't change the way I'm going to live. Maybe very literally if free will doesn't exist.
Number 10, the human drive for life after death. This is evidence for God's existence. We were designed with a desire to obtain life after death. Every single religion tries to explain what's going to happen after we die. And this is a wonderful promise, for if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, if you believe that this morning, say amen. Jesus died and rose again. Even so, them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. If there's no God, you'll never see loved ones that you have had pass on in your life that you've loved so dearly. But if there is a God, you'll see your loved ones again someday. The Bible says that we have this hope that we will see them which sleep in Jesus, and God will bring them with him.
And this is why I find religion so disgusting sometimes, because it ends up manipulating people like this. Because, right, so Matt is telling his flock that if God exists, you'll see your loved ones again. So there's an emotional attachment there and an emotional desire to see their families. Now, with that being the case in their minds, they also realise that if they end up going to hell, they will not see their families and their loved ones. Now, if they joined another religion, in their mind, from that previous place that they were in, this in-group, they'll be going to hell because they've betrayed God, they've left. They've chosen a different path, whatever it is, I don't know. Depending on their version of hell, I don't want to assume. But they'll have chosen a different path, they'll have chosen separation of this specific God, and they wouldn't see their family. So there's this emotional attachment and emotional requirement to stay. This is also a sign of evolution with a religion, because if a religion does this sort of manipulation, then it keeps members probably more commonly. So these types of religions are more likely to survive people's beliefs and stick around in them. But no, I don't believe in an afterlife. If I experience one, as I mentioned in the previous video, I believe it to be like a near-death experience, a spike in brain activity that can last longer than the actual spike itself, or at least in a perceived manner. So I could perceive an hour even though it's been 5 minutes, let's say, just for simplicity. And if I do see my family there, then I guess that would be nice, but it would just be a hallucination. I don't know if there's an afterlife, but I don't think there is going to be one. Which means my life right now has a lot of value, because it's the only one I get. I don't get an infinity to experience reality. If heaven is real, then I would still be experiencing reality in heaven. I don't get that time in my mind. If I do, I still don't think I will, so I'm going to treat my life currently even better than I can, the best that I can do. But, with heaven in mind, what's the point? I'll have infinite life in heaven. I have a finite amount of time on earth, but ultimately my existence will be forever. Existence becomes meaningless. It's not even a part of the equation anymore. Now, I will admit, I was born in a family who had religious beliefs, like they believed in God, but they never took me to church, or they never told me about God. We didn't have a Bible lying around, as far as I knew, at least anyway. So I grew up fairly free from religion. It was around me. I was aware of it. I wasn't forced into anything. I'm pretty happy about that, thankfully. Because as a child, I didn't have any innate feeling towards a God. I thought it was just like Santa Claus. Even when I saw it around me, and I don't say that just as some hand-wavery, I genuinely mean that. I saw Santa Claus, I saw it was fake eventually, and when I saw God, I thought that was just the older version. Genuinely, that's how I saw it. And it's fair enough if you didn't see it that way, and still don't. But for me, I just saw it that way. However, what Matt's on about now, the innate feeling for an afterlife or whatever, I did have that as a child. But ironically, that feeling was if I die, I will then get all knowledge, essentially. All my questions will be answered. That's it. It was no eternal praise, no eternal pleasure or experience, or a life that lasted forever afterwards. I didn't even believe that. But I did hope for all knowledge, and that was kind of my innate feeling for an afterlife. I just wished that, essentially it was a wish. That's exactly what it was. Just a wish that my answers will be given to me once I die, that all my questions, I'm here now to figure it out for fun, but once I die, that they'll be answered. That was my only thing for an afterlife that I hoped, and I'll say I was about 10. Maybe teenage years I also thought the same, maybe. So, I'm just trying to reason, create that common ground between me and Matt Powell. But no, I don't think that that's the case at all anymore. But yes, I do understand the point of a human drive towards an afterlife, but I don't think there is one. And now we're at the end. Surprisingly, there's no proofs of God. I mean, all of these things could have been explained with something else, but he's chosen God as his answer. So that's all it is, really. It's presuppositionalist, and honestly, I was expecting more from Matt Powell, the one and only Matt Powell. Proofs of God, I was expecting something decent. He did say it would only be quick, but, he had 10 points to make and missed the mark on each one of them. You'd think at least, one of them would have been good. Maybe he was saving the best till last. Maybe he'd use the one at the beginning for shock value. But no. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. If you find any videos like this online, then I'm very interested in finding proof of God and other statements of theism, maybe even different versions of it. Maybe there's a person who does believe that the universe is God. I'd like to see a video like that. So let me know what you thought. Thank you for watching, and I'll probably still be doing a mixture of both of these in the future, so we'll see how it goes. Thank you for watching. I'll see you around.